This right here is the new Sigma 17-40 f1.8 art lens. And when I first saw this thing announced, the very first question that I raised in my head was, could this replace my collection of fast primes, particularly for night photography? Lately, I've been obsessed with shooting New York at night. I feel like you just always find something fresh, something interesting. But in doing so, I generally shoot handheld, no tripod. So a fast lens is always a must in this scenario. And this has led me to build out a little collection of different prime lenses, the 23 f1.4, 35, 56. And obviously I love having all these lenses, but I will say the main problem that arises for me is analysis paralysis. I am constantly debating what lens I should bring with me when I'm going out to shoot. I'll take the 56 and then I'll wish I had the 23, or I'll take the 35 and I'll regret leaving the 56 at home. And sometimes I'll bring them all with me, and then when I'm at a scene, I won't be able to choose which one's the best for that moment. I'm swapping lenses, in the middle of that scene, and I end up missing moments entirely. So that's why when Sigma announced this 17-40 f1.8, it caught my attention immediately. Now, after I expressed interest in the lens, the Sigma team was kind enough to send me a loaner to have for a couple of weeks. And after using it, I wanted to share some of the thoughts that I have on the lens, and also some of the images that I took, of course. And lastly, of course, address the analysis paralysis issue and that question of, can this actually, replace my prime kit collection? Just to be clear though, Sigma did loan me this lens, but they did not sponsor this video. All the thoughts in this video are completely my own. Now that said, let's get into it. And the first thing I want to discuss is the build and just general design of this lens. Now, first things first, I do want to knock away some of the specs from this lens, just list them off for you guys. Of course, it offers focal lengths between 17 to 40 millimeters, which on a full frame is going to be like 25 to 60 millimeters, give or take. And it's got that fixed f1.8 aperture constantly all the way through this entire focal length range. Right when I unboxed it, my initial impression of it was that it is big and it's definitely pretty heavy, but it's not as big as I thought it would be. It is slightly longer than my 16 to 55 f2.8 from Fuji, but noticeably thinner. Obviously, faster apertures are going to require a bigger front element, so the lens has to be pretty big. But again, even considering that, I'm still pretty impressed that it's not gigantic. I expected it to be a lot bigger when I unboxed it. Now, the build quality is pretty solid, even though it is, I think, mostly made of plastic materials. It doesn't feel cheap in any way. And in terms of the weight, again, it's definitely heavier than a lot of the lenses that I own, but I'm usually lugging around a big kit of primes, so replacing all of those with this one lens is obviously a lot lighter. Internal zoom is going to be another huge plus in this lens. It basically just means that the lens doesn't extend physically when you zoom in or out. And this will make the lens a little bit more weather resistant, a little bit more dust resistant, and I think a little bit more rugged for street work and just different styles of photography in different, conditions. It also has an aperture ring, which I think is really cool, especially for, a Fuji user. So I found that to be a nice touch on the lens. Now, as I mentioned, I've been walking around the city with this lens for the last couple of weeks just to get a feel for it. And I've had that main goal of just seeing whether it helps with my analysis paralysis. Can it replace that collection of primes that I've built up and I'm constantly carrying when I go out to shoot at night? And ultimately, it did simplify the process for me quite a bit. No more, of course, second guessing focal lengths when I'm at a scene, or even, having to switch lenses while the scene is unraveling. I can just zoom, and obviously that led to less moments being missed and more photos actually being taken, which I think is a plus. Now, one thing I wasn't sure about was whether f1.8 was going to be enough speed. I do have a tendency to shoot fully wide open on my prime lenses, so that means f1.4 or even f1.2. So with this being f1.8, obviously there's a smidge less aperture there, of course, and I was curious whether or not I was gonna actually miss that or actually be affected by it. But for 98% of scenes, I found this to be perfectly fast enough to, gather enough light to capture whatever I was trying to. And in those 2% of cases, I of course just bumped my ISO. Now, aside from this, obviously autofocus is a big area. I found it to be pretty snappy in most cases. And although I basically shot this lens wide open almost the entire time I was using it, it was pretty sharp based on what I was seeing on the screen when editing, but it's an art lens, so it wasn't a surprise to me that this lens was really clean, really sharp. But in general, to my pleasant surprise, I felt way more present using this lens than using a bunch of primes. Obviously, in part because I wasn't thinking about having to switch my lens to test different focal lengths. So it just meant less time, overthinking the gear and more time actually taking photos, just being present in the process. So could this replace my prime kit collection? Not completely, I think. In terms of aperture, of course, f1.8 again is fine for most cases, but there are scenarios where I'd want an even more shallow depth of field or just want that extra speed. So keeping some of the prime lenses that I have does still, I think, make sense to me. And then in terms of focal lengths, obviously 17 to 40 is a really good range, but it doesn't offer anything above that 40. So there are potential scenarios where one of my tighter prime lenses would come in handy. For example, I use the 56 a lot for a lot of my street photography at night. I just love how tight that lens is, how deep into a detail you can get. And to achieve that look with this 17 to 40, I'd obviously have to crop in pretty considerably. So that obviously isn't ideal, but even so, the 17 to 40 provides so much variety that just taking that with me, I felt like all my bases were still pretty covered. So I guess in that regard, this did kind of do the job of replacing my prime kit, but I think in an ideal world, just to achieve all the different looks I like, I'd probably pair this lens with the 56 and kind of make that my duo for night photography. Between the two, I'd be able to achieve both the flexibility and the speed and just all of the, looks that I want to get without having too much stuff on me at one time. This all said though, I hope this video was helpful in some way if you were curious about this lens. I'd love to hear in the comments below what your thoughts are about this lens or any of the points that I actually raised about this lens. And lastly, of course, I would love it if you'd subscribe to the channel if you found this video helpful, because I'm going to continue to make more videos about gear in kind of the Fuji and adjacent ecosystem in the future. So stick around if that's something that would be of interest to you. That said, thank you again for watching. I will see you in the next episode. Cheers.